no other material gives you color like glass does. No other material has the ability to take in light and radiate out color like glass. So you arrive in this little airport on Paradise Island, and then you see Atlantis, the new Atlantis, twin towers with a bridge connecting them. I was shown through the new hotel and shown the older Atlantis, which is going to be linked together, the two hotels, with a gaming room in between. And it was here that Saul wanted me to do the Temple of the Moon and the Temple of the Sun. So when you're in this hotel, half the time you're underwater. You're looking through the ancient city of Atlantis. I mean, it's an aquarium, but it's far more than that. It's the ancient city. It's architecture underwater. 8 million gallons of it. There's going to be this liquid connection and this power of color and light and glass blowing, of human breath to make the forms of the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon and the Crystal Gate. It's a very exciting project to work on.
My brief to the architects was we're going to create something here that is our creation. And it gave us a great challenge. I said what it has to be is just very different. People have got to discover Atlantis and actually, although they know we've just built it, begin to believe it.
There's a direct correlation between glass and water and ice and sea. And Saul, I think, knew this, that glass would be appropriate for this resort. It's really been a pleasure working with Saul. You know, he's one of these visionaries that has an idea and can project out what it is that he wants to do.
The concept of Atlantis really arose when we bought the Paradise Island Hotel and Casino. The Governor General's wife called me one day. She said, wow, she said, I'm so pleased. Our oceans are so great. There's so much history to it. And she said, you know, even Atlantis is at the bottom of Bimini. So I thought, wow, what an idea, Atlantis.
A way a project like this comes about with Atlantis is that, you know, I meet with the client. We meet with the architects. We meet with the interior designers. We see where it is that a Chihuly piece of sculpture, Chihuly chandelier, whatever it might be, might fit and work for this space. And at that point, it becomes a collaboration of working with the client or the developer or the architect, the designers, working together, trying to figure out what is it we're trying to do. And once that was established, then it's up to me to go back to the studio, go back to the drawing board, you might say, to determine what it is, you know, that I wanted to do. What did I take from Atlantis, from Paradise Island, that inspired me to make what it is that I wanted to make? Again, the idea, the Temple of the Sun, the Temple of the Moon, and the Crystal Gate were all Saul's ideas. Those are things that he wanted. And I enjoyed working under that mandate of make me something that looks like the sun. And I really like to work on paper. But I think the drawings play a very central role in my creativity. If I didn't draw, I don't think the work would have progressed at the rate or in the directions that the work has gone. The drawings are a really major part of my work. So it's a process of blowing, building with glass and steel, going back and blowing some more, building some more. It's a give and take, back and forth process. And I can never make a drawing or a model and tell somebody like Saul Kirshner, the client for Atlantis, exactly what it's going to be, because I don't know what it's going to be until I build it.
Chihuly works in a collaborative process. And, you know, he has an idea or a vision and drawings are done, but those drawings get translated through the glass blowers. The gaffers bring tremendous creativity to this process of, you know, bringing parts and forms and colors and textures, you know, to completion. And then another group of people then take those forms and then assemble them into, you know, more complex forms. There's a whole group of folks that bring their individual talents and creativity to make these things happen. I think one of his geniuses is his ability to motivate and draw people around him to do what is really kind of a theatrical, or maybe he's turned it into a theatrical art form. Somebody like myself fits into that larger collaborative team, if you will.
You know, as it is, there's a certain amount of collaboration between me and everybody on the team. I mean, I work with the glass blowers, and I tell the glass blowers what I want, but I also tell them, you have to have the right feeling for it. You have to give me your input. You're the ones that are making the parts, and each part is different. And you have to have the rhythm and the feeling and find your pace. And if you see something going a certain way, go with the flow. You have to listen to the glass.
Then we don't have to have them all straight. They can sort of angle out a bit. So for the crystal of the gate, the piece starts off with a clear bubble. And over the clear bubble, we then put some white opaline color that's then smashed down onto the piece. And the way that's manipulated and put on determines the way the white is inside the crystal of the gate pieces. And then over that, we gather clear glass again. So once we put the white on, we reheat it, and then we can gather clear glass over that, and then another layer of clear glass over that. Now they're going to reheat the piece up in the glory hole. So that piece is going in the glory hole, the 2,500 degree glory hole. Put a little air in it. Going to get it hot. It's got to be just the right temperature. Here we are. It's steel mold for the crystal gate. Hot glass coming down, going into the mold. A little bit of pressure, not too much. Air going in. Takes the exact form of the mold. He's blowing and he's beginning to pull it out. So that form in the bottom of the mold is staying there. Now this neck is being put on, so a place to break it off.
Pop again. Good.
So there it is. That's the shape of the mold that was down there. Now the glass looks a lot more yellowish because it's hot. You know, the glass is still like 1,600 degrees here, so it has a yellow color. In actual fact, it's a crystal clear color with this white opal on the top, fading down to clear. So he's using air here and fire here, cooling this and heating this. All right, we're going to break it off. a whack of the blowpipe, and it's broken off. Now we got a sharp edge here. Bring in the oxyacetylene torch, 4,000 degrees of heat on that sharp break. We'll just melt it, soften that edge for about 10 seconds, then quickly over to the annealing ovens, because if that's out of the oven any more than that, it'll break. It's got to get very quickly into the annealing ovens and spend the night in there and cool down slowly.
Well, you know, I did installations starting back in 1966 when I went to the University of Wisconsin. And then it was back, they were more experimental, using plastics and neon and ice and glass. And that was at a time when all these materials were kind of being discovered by artists. Then I started doing also a lot of stained glass and architecture, and we went up to Art Park. I don't know, somehow back in the early 70s, I started doing the Navajo blanket cylinders, then the Irish cylinders, and then the baskets. And I didn't get back into doing architectural projects until in the 80s sometime. Slowly, Chihuly Land went from making more objects to making more installations.
Dale works with these individually blown pieces, and the concept is you can take the individual parts and compose anything that you can imagine.
My real love was never the glass blowing, but the object itself. What I'm looking forward to is opening the ovens in the morning and taking the pieces out and then being able to work with them, to put them together. And I probably took that to extreme with the chandelier series, which I started in 1992 with the Seattle Art Museum. 10 days before the show opened, I decided to make a chandelier. It was made up of about 500 parts, very simple forms that a beginning glassblower could make almost. And over the next couple of years, I made about 25 chandeliers. Not one of them ever sold. All of a sudden, somebody bought one, and then somebody bought another one, and they started selling. Fortunately, they turned out to be that people did like them. It just took them a couple of years to want them. And that often happens with my work. I'll start a series, and it'll take a couple of years before people can understand it, or maybe they have to see it over and over. I don't know what it really takes.
What do you think about the color, James?
I think it's spectacular. I mean, when you imagine the color of those copper beams and the gold ceiling and all this stuff, it's great because it couldn't be all gold, you know.
No.
And I tell you, the lighting is really nice. I think Dale's actually sort of a rare breed in that he is very, very high principled. He has a very strong look or kind of philosophy, I think, that goes through all of his pieces. Within his venue, he is incredibly flexible in working with us and to try to achieve the right balance of color and shape and scale and proportion so that the piece actually fits just absolutely perfectly within the environment that we're trying to create.
That is a gorgeous piece, and it could, because of the darker amber browns in it, you can have a little more of that contrast.
I remember Chihuly presenting his first mock-ups of, at small scale, of what he envisioned the sun and the moon being, and actually the crystal gate as well. Actually, one of his assistants, I think Parks, did it in a room full of designers, and all designers tend to add their 2 cents into anything and everything, and they want this changed and they want this different and so on. And it was interesting to see that Mr. Kirchner and I actually felt that there is a point where when you hire a Dale Chihuly, you have to listen to the artist. So let's not mess around with the art, and let's not try to make it something that we want it to be versus what he feels it should be.
I think in most cases, Saul probably creates the pieces. And I'm sure that Saul is very instrumental in the look of the architecture and the design of a lot of aspects of the building and even the details. But in my case, he wanted me to create the piece. He told his designers and architects that I've hired an artist to do something, and in the end of the day, we want what it is that the artist wants to do. We don't want to tell the artist what to do. And that was very helpful, because had he tried to dictate what it is that I was trying to make, we'd have ended up with a compromise. And that never works. You can't make art by committee. Now, that isn't to say that Saul didn't come out here a half a dozen times and work with us very carefully and give his ideas about what he liked and didn't like. And that isn't to say that I didn't appreciate that and try to also listen to what it was that he wanted. That one's symmetrical, that one's symmetrical, but those are nice too.
And then, of course, the lighting was installed in there so that you could actually view the piece with the lighting conditions that you're actually going to experience on site. And everybody was always, willing to try out a new technique, to look at it a different way, or to blow another piece of glass, whatever it took to get it done perfect. And I think it says a lot about just the whole organization.
All of these ideas are completely new. How do you engineer a sculpture that's 20,000 pounds? How do you build a structure that works with the concept? The Temple of the Sun and the Moon, in terms of doing a sculpture that's a sphere, how do you mount all the glass in a complete sphere if you have to be inside wiring the glass? How do you solve these kinds of challenges?
So the Temple of the Moon has 900 parts, and the armature is this round ball of steel. I'm sure this piece weighs at least 10,000 pounds. The idea is that it's bluer on one side and then it goes to white, kind of like the phases of the moon. So this is the crystal gate of Atlantis. 2,600 pieces of crystal. I was hoping that it would take about 1,000 pieces, but no such luck. This was a very complex piece, but it's a totally unique piece. And I'm very, very proud of this piece. Crystal
gate. In this case, I really had to make them look like crystals in order to make it fulfill the feeling of the crystal gate. And so how I did it, I had my choice of how I did it. And that's where the fascination came into the project for me, to do something entirely different.
The glass is new. They've never blown square glass or glass that's all faceted like this. Normally with the glass, there was a way you could turn it to find a place that it fit into. You got to go and find each piece. And often the piece you want doesn't exist.
The Crystal Gate was the third, and you know, it's an exceedingly complex sculpture involving thousands of pieces of glass, complex armature, rigid pieces, which, you know, very strictly rigid pieces, which Chihuly normally, you know, it's not part of his language, and that piece goes from these literal crystal-like forms and it merges into more organic shape as you go up the piece.
The Temple of the Sun, probably made up of about 2,000 parts in yellow, oranges, and reds, and then all the different combinations thereof. And so it'll be, you know, shapes that are, you know, more like this.
So there they are picking up the glass. As you can see, the piece is symmetrical. Joey's going to heat it up in the glory hole. He's got it hot enough to stretch out. Now, JP is blowing on it a little bit. Joey's actually got some compressed air in his hand, so he's chilling part of it. Now he's stretching it. He'd be stretching and chilling at the same time in order to get the thickness just right. Okay. So you're going to see him twist it now, get the form he wants, and then bring it over here and cut the knob off. So there he is. He's got it hot enough to pull out now. And Kim is suited up with an asbestos suit so that she can go into an oven that's 950 degrees. They're chilling the neck now, so if they chill it, then they can break it off.
Oh, wow.
Now she's going to go into the oven, and it'll stay in there overnight and cool down slowly.
I think the greatest challenge, and I didn't believe it was capable of being done, is the final piece. When the casino was coming together, I felt that the high limits area needed a little more light. And I called Dale up, and he came over, and I discussed with him. I said, I'd love this to be all about the ocean. I said, do you think you could do forms of the ocean? And when I just saw the forms, all the glass lying on the carpet, I said to Dale's man, Parks, I said, Parks, this, I'm sure, is going to be a masterpiece.
So this piece was, I designed it and completed it in about a 2-week period.
The shape was more quintessential Chihuly, I suppose. I mean, the shape was dictated by the ceiling. I really didn't see any other way to do it. And then we put the pooties in there, and the sea creatures, and the blowfish, and the jellyfish, and, you know, the octopus, and the skates went inside it, which you barely see. You sort of have to look up and discover them.
I came up with the idea of lighting it from these two machias. So the light source in this piece are two 500-watt spotlights coming out of the two machias. And they look just like they're glowing. You don't realize that the light source is from there. So this is another kind of shell form, a piece that's blown, and then it's a wrap that's been wrapped around it, and then it's blown out some more, and so you get some volume in and around that, and that part will be hanging down from the chandelier in that way. Then you get these spots with these metals that have come to the surface, iridized in what we call a reducing atmosphere, where the precious metals come to the surface. If you look through it, the light through it, and it's much more amber and golden. You don't get that surface reflection. Pino Signoretto, I sent him a fax, told him to make 6 putti on C-form, just to add a little points of discovery in the piece. And so Pino did that for me and sent it out in 3 days.
Dale loves big, and I think he's getting his dream in going bigger and bigger. And sometimes he even gets taken aback by the scale, I think. And you know, I think that's it's sort of self-perpetuating, that he's out there, I'm sure, trying to get bigger projects now because we have the ability to do them. And now that he knows that we can do them, he's going to be sort of difficult to stop, probably.
Because glass has been around for a long time, and it took Dale to see what glass could be and to elevate it to a point where nobody's ever seen. Our casino's much better for it, our project's better for it, and we're all better for it. And you know, it's just a pleasure to be able to work with somebody that has that much vision, I think, to be able to create something out of glass. You know, because what is it? Just glass, but in his hands, it's something much, much more.
It's interesting to do a project that you've never done before. You think of something, and you know that comes out looking like maybe it's not yours because no one's ever seen anything that looks like it, and no one's ever seen any of your work that looks like it. So you're out there on the edge a little bit when you're doing something that you've never done before and that nobody else has ever done before. But I like it. I like being out there. I'd rather roll the dice and make something I haven't made before than sort of repeat myself.
What I love about Dale Chihuly is that he's a great artist, but you can actually talk to him. So it's been great fun, and I'm sure as we do more work, Dale's work is going to be part of it.